This afternoon, we have with us Dr. Elizabeth P. Claiborne. She is an emergency medicine physician from Baltimore, Maryland, and she is affiliated with multiple hospitals in the area. She received her medical degree from Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine and has been in practice between 6 and 10 years. Dr. Claiborne is currently a faculty member of the University of Maryland School of Medicine. She is in the Department of Emergency Medicine with an academic focus on ethics, health policy, end of care, and innovation entrepreneurship. Virginia Baptist, Dr. Claiborne. Dr. Claiborne, Virginia Baptist.
Thank you for having me.
I want to say good afternoon to each and every one of you. Thank you, Dr. Waddell Jones, for that wonderful introduction of our invited guest today. We are happy to have sharing with us with the Virginia Baptist State Convention, Dr. Elizabeth Claiborne, who we're certainly excited to hear what she has to say today concerning COVID, health, and the African American community. As you all know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a true crisis, not only as a people, but also in the context of many of our churches. And so today we've asked Dr. Elizabeth Claiborne to come and to share with us many things that we feel would be beneficial to, in particular, the African American church and faith-based community that will help us all in navigating through this trying time that we've really never had to deal with before. And so will you help me give a Virginia Baptist State Convention welcome to Dr. Elizabeth Claiborne. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and it's an honor to be able to talk to so many people about this very important topic that has had a substantial impact on many communities of color. And I think that there's really a special place for the church community to intervene on behalf of their members and on behalf of the community to improve the overall health of those who are at highest risk. And I'm happy to be here and talking about this topic.
Well, thank you very much. We're excited to have you. I know your schedule is very, very busy, and especially during this season and the work that you're doing. And so we're not going to keep you all day, just 3 or 4 hours. That's it. Just kidding. Listen, tell us a little bit about yourself and the scope of your work and practice.
Sure. So I am a board certified emergency medicine physician. I have an adjunct assistant professorship with the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and I practice actually at Prince George's Hospital Center, which is a busy county hospital just outside of Washington, D.C. I would say that the patient population that I take care of there is probably 85% African American. So I take care of, people who look like me, and it is an underserved community. And it was especially hard hit during COVID. And so I had a very upfront, and introduction to COVID when it first started last year. I was actually heavily pregnant at the time when the pandemic first hit, and fortunately was able to work through the first wave safely and gave birth to my daughter in May. And when I came back to work later in the fall, some of the same problems were still existing, and the community in Prince George's and all around the country, especially for communities of color, was really dire. And it continues to kind of bother me to see that long-standing health disparities that have been existing in our communities for a long time were really unearthed by this pandemic. And I think that it has called the attention of the community and the nation that we need to pay more attention to what's going on and make sure that resources are directed at those communities. So I practice there. I also, am a family member, by the way, of Pastor Whitfield. So my husband, Philip, is from Virginia, grew up there. And so, it's just really an honor for me to be able to talk to people who are connected to my family in that network. And I am a big believer that, change really starts at the grassroots in the community, in the small spaces where you make a huge impact on the lives of people who are at most risk. And so I'm always happy to talk to organizations like this that make big differences in the lives of people.
Certainly. Thank you so very much. And let me say how very proud, as a family member, how proud we are of you and the work that you do, and continuously giving of yourself so that others can be bettered. And so this is not just a profession for you, but it's also a passion. And we're appreciative of you, and we're just excited for all that you're doing. And we're very honored to call you our family. So I do want to say, before I get into these questions and our time together, for those of you who are on Facebook Live, we want to give you the opportunity. If you have questions, you can put them in the comment section, and we'll see if we can get those answered today from Dr. Claiborne. But I'm sure that many of the questions that you all have, I'm sure she will address them during our time of presenting today. And so we're going to jump right on into it. When we talk about COVID-19 and the coronavirus, et cetera, what are the, well, not just the virus, but now we're moving towards vaccination, et cetera. And so what are the 3 types of vaccines that are available as of right now? As of today, what are the 3 vaccines that are available?
Sure. So, just to give people an understanding of where we are in this pandemic, because I think this is important information to understand leading up to the vaccines that are available and the recommendations that I give as a physician to my family and everyone that I talk to. The coronavirus is a kind of a new type of virus, but it's within the family of virus that we see every year. The common cold is actually a coronavirus. This particular variant that has caused this pandemic, COVID-19, is a new variant that has spread very quickly across the globe and has caused a lot of issues. And so when we first entered the pandemic, people were very skeptical that we were going to have the ability to develop a vaccine quickly. But of course, this has substantially impacted not just the United States, but the entire globe and the economies of many countries. So all of those countries put their efforts behind getting a vaccine that works. And I think that it's important to understand that that is part of the reason that we were able to produce vaccines quickly. In addition to that, there had been longstanding technology that had been studied since the outbreak of the SARS pandemics that led to the mRNA vaccines, which are responsible for 2 of the 3 that are available, which are Pfizer and Moderna. So both Pfizer and Moderna are a special kind of newer type of vaccine where they use mRNA technology to teach your body how to make the spike protein, which is kind of the entry protein of this virus, and block it so that you do not get the virus. And the whole kind of warp speed and the concerns, the very valid concerns I think that some people have about the speed in which this vaccine was produced, I think can be a little bit put to rest if you understand that there was underlying information, because they were studying this in relation to SARS, and they just basically took that data and applied it to this new COVID-19 virus and were able to produce a very effective vaccine in a short period of time. So the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are both mRNA. They both require 2 doses. They both have, I would say, like equivalent factors. So, they're, very effective in protecting against severe disease and hospitalization, over, 94 to 96%. They both require doses that are 3 to 4 weeks apart, and their side effect profiles are similar, mostly mild symptoms. When I got the Pfizer vaccine, I was one of the very first people to be vaccinated, and that was an honor for me. I mean, I had, as I mentioned, been serving on the front lines for months, and I was very pregnant. I had to go through an entire pregnancy with no protection, really. And so as soon as I had access to a vaccine, I was happy to get that. And I can't tell you how relieved I was to know that I was finally going to be going to work and not worried about bringing home an illness that could get my husband sick, my children sick, my parents who are older. And so I think that is really miraculous, the speed in which they were able to get this technology and deliver it. And then, as you guys know, there's then a third vaccine, which is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I know there's a lot of concerns about the J&J vaccine. They had a lot of bad press related to some isolated adverse outcomes related to blood clots. But I want to just put this in perspective. The number of cases that they had, which were about 6 after 6.85 million people were administered this vaccine, is negligible. And that is a very, very small number. It is literally 1 in a million chance of having this very, severe side effect. And so I would not be dismayed from getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I think what the government has done is they reintroduced it. They understand there's some caveats to it. There's particular people that may not be best suited for that, particularly women between the ages of 18 and 55. But if you fall outside that group, the J&J vaccine is attractive because it is a one-shot vaccine. It does not require follow-up. So especially for men, I think in particular, who are just like trying to get this done and don't want to have to worry about following up, it works. And now its efficacy is a little lower. It uses a more traditional technology that you are used to seeing other vaccines that you might have received in your childhood, like MMR. It uses that same technology to get you vaccinated, but it still provides adequate, and I would say very, very comprehensive protection against you getting seriously ill, which means not getting hospitalized and not dying. And that's what the name of the game is, right? People get sick. I see people getting sick all the time. The goal really is to not get so severely ill that you have to be hospitalized and to not die from the virus. And that's what all 3 of the vaccines provide. And so currently my recommendation for people is to go ahead and get vaccinated with whichever vaccine is readily available to you. And you can have a conversation with your doctor if you're worried about one versus the other. Now, we are extremely fortunate in the United States that we have actually now a surplus of vaccines, and that is not the case for the rest of the world. So I always tell people when we're worried about vaccinations that you got to look at what other people are doing, trying to just get access to this in other countries. And we need to just count our blessings and make sure that we're doing our due diligence, asking the questions so that you can make an informed decision for yourself. But my recommendation is to vaccinate and to, access what other vaccine comes up first for you.
Sure. And thank you for that. Very, very insightful. As you, forementioned, there are, vaccines, they're available everywhere. And to me, it seems as though in the African American community, there are many people who are weary. There were individuals who were anxious and they were ready to be vaccinated. And then there's another demographic in the African American community. They are still, a little skeptical regarding getting the vaccine. So much so here in Virginia that the Virginia Department of Health, VDH, they, under the leadership of our governor, they're really targeting education in the African American community as well as the Hispanic community. And so with that, with the Virginia Department of Health getting behind and undergirding many of these vaccine clinics, they're having them, hosting them, and many people are not showing up. And I was just wondering if you could take the opportunity to just kind of speak to those individuals who do have apprehensions regarding whether or not the vaccine is going to harm them. And that's what I think. To me, it's education. And then it's, what are the risks? And so can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And I think this is, such an important topic, as following my pregnancy and serving on the front lines, I've been on national networks like CNN and MSNBC.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a topic that I think is just so important because when you're making a decision about whether or not you need to be vaccinated, your question is, do I think I will be safer getting COVID? Or do I think I will be safer being vaccinated? That is the risk you're concerning. Because when you don't get vaccinated and you're taking the dice with COVID, I can tell you what those outcomes look like. I can tell you the numerous people that I pronounced dead, the numerous people who had strokes and heart attacks due to COVID. And I'm talking about people of all ages, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and especially our older people or anyone who has risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes. That is why our community has been so hard hit, because we have a preponderance of, underlying health conditions which elevate our risk for having severe COVID disease. And so I think when you're making the decision, first, the decision is coming down to, do I think it's safer to get COVID or is it safer to get the vaccine? And my answer is, I think it's much safer to get the vaccine. I've already explained, I think, some of the hesitancy that we see in our community is that people don't really trust what went on with the government, right? Like we did this warp speed project. Why are they doing this vaccine so fast? Why are they enforcing it and everyone has to do it? It's because, this is a very, very contagious virus. And, its mortality is actually not as severe as it could be. I mean, could you imagine if we had a pandemic that hit children especially hard? Or was more severe in younger people versus older people. This disease is dangerous, but like most dangerous to the people who are at highest risk. And in an African-American community, you are one of those people. You are higher risk just because you are African-American. And so I think that is another reason why you would want to protect yourself. I also like to bring up when we're talking about the vaccine hesitancy is that a lot of people kind of think back to why we have a mistrust of our healthcare system to begin with. And Tuskegee is something that's frequently mentioned. And so I like to put that in context, right? Tuskegee was took place, first of all, during a time where people did a lot of things behind closed doors and just basically manipulated and took advantage of people. And what they did in that particular era is they injected men with syphilis and then basically let them die from that disease without any treatment to study its natural course. And so this is different both in that it's actually a treatment that we're offering people, and also it is not happening, behind closed doors. This is 2021. Everything is online. Everything is open. There has to be complete transparency. I mean, they pulled J&J vaccine off its recommendation for the government because they had these cases. The government is having to be extremely transparent about everything that's happening. They cannot just have some secretive thing take place, a bunch of adverse outcomes, and people not know about it. I also encourage people to think about, why are rich white people trying to get this vaccine as quickly as they can? I mean, you need to pay attention to who's trying to get it. When it first came out, there were issues with people lying or going into other, communities that were supposed to have certain vaccines so they could get it first. That should be an indication to you that this is something that is valuable and protective. And I think that thinking about it in the context of where we live now, where it has happened in the past, I totally understand why there's a mistrust of the healthcare system. As an African-American physician, I know that when I go in to take care of patients, I sometimes see a sigh of relief on patients' faces when they see me, because they're like, well, at least she should try to level with us, right? She's not going to recommend something that, she wouldn't recommend to her own family. And that's true. And so I'm telling you, as someone who has looked at the research, looked at the data, understands the mechanisms, understands the side effects, this is a vaccine that I consider all three of them to be safe, effective, and highly recommended. And I have seen what happens when you roll the dice with whether or not you want to have COVID. And I've pronounced more people dead than I care to share. And it is a devastating experience for a family member to have to go through this and lose a loved one from something that is now going to be preventable because we can vaccinate. So I never want to discount people's worries. What I would encourage you to do if you're hesitant is to ask more questions. What's your hesitation? What's your question? You can do research now. They actually published all of the data. You'll be happy to know that for both the Moderna and Pfizer, they did have African Americans in those trials. It was actually proportionally represented to what we see in the United States. So 10 to 11% African American. They had people with, diseases like HIV, hypertension, diabetes. All of those people were included in the studies that led up to the actual FDA approval of the vaccine. And so I think that, this day and age that the government has been forced to be very transparent. Times have changed and the entire world is watching this unfold. So, to put this in a global context, you got to look at, our brothers and sisters in developing countries in Africa and India and parts of the world where they don't have resources. They are dying and they will continue to die because they do not have access to this vaccine. So we do not need to squander this blessing that we really have in the United States by having a surplus of vaccines. And so if you know somebody in your congregation or your community that is hesitant, reach out to them, talk to them. The only way that we will be able to return to any sense of normalcy in the world or the United States is when we get adequately vaccinated, and the entire, that requires the majority of the population to be vaccinated. So that's generally what I like to bring up, but I do not discount people's fears. I understand where they're coming from. Just get more information and get those questions answered so you can make a good informed decision for yourself and your family.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. One of the things the African American churches, we have, and I hate to say this, but sometimes we want to be at the forefront of an initiative for the wrong reasons. And what I mean by that is, I know that there are pastors and churches even in our Virginia Baptist State Convention who and I even know in our area where churches, they were running to be advocates and running to say, I want to host a clinic. I want to give out the vaccines at my church. And that's a noble cause. But I think what has happened and what has caused the challenge that we're facing now with the overabundance of vaccines and not enough recipients is we got caught up in the hype and we failed to do the educational piece alongside of the vaccination clinics. The vaccination clinics are wonderful, but right now we have a problem. People are having clinics, but I don't think we're getting the education out and the information out and teaching and answering the questions. And this is why we're here today, is because it is valuable, it is important, it is imperative for us to have the information regarding the vaccination, its effects, so that it will help to relinquish many of the fears that those that we serve have and those that we live with have. When we talk about being vaccinated, Dr. Claiborne, can you speak to, now I'm vaccinated. I have the vaccine. Can you talk about the spread or the continued spread or becoming a carrier and kind of talk about, am I going to be able to, when I get the vaccine, are you putting COVID inside of me? And then will I have the chance to catch it again or catch it after being vaccinated?
Sure. So, first dealing with the questions about the vaccine. So the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, which are mRNA vaccines, do not contain any actual virus particles at all. That is actually why they're such a safe, effective vaccine. All they're really giving you is the mRNA, like kind of code to teach your body how to block entry of this virus into your cells. And so when you get administered a vaccine, the reason that people have side effects, and the most common side effects are things like fever, headache, fatigue, arm soreness. I only had arm soreness for both of mine, but I do know a number of people who got a little sicker. And I think it's important to be mentally prepared that might happen. Now, those side effects of getting a fever, feeling, unwell for 24 to 48 hours is substantially less severe than what's going to happen to you if you get COVID in most cases. And so that's, again, why you want to put that in that context. Now, the J&J vaccine takes kind of an inactive particle, a double-stranded DNA strand from the virus, but it is not enough information to make the virus. So for none of these vaccines are you actually getting injected with an inactive virus, or, you do not have a chance you do not get sick from the virus. When people are getting symptoms from the virus, it's because your immune system is ramping up to respond the way it's supposed to, so that it learns how to make the particular proteins that will block this virus in the future. That is what you're getting. It's not that you're getting a mild case of COVID. It's just your immune system doing what it knows how to do, so it learns to make the tools needed to block the vaccine in the future. So that's, number one. I think, for, your points about the vaccine clinics, which I think are great. I think that's important for people to be able to be vaccinated in a location and with people that they're comfortable with. They're more likely to do it. But I totally agree with you that now we're in a phase where we need to have outreach to get to those people who are just really hesitant or, don't want to get vaccinated or think that they'll be fine. And I think what you have to remember is that we are still a ways from getting out of this pandemic. Now we're predicting that we may not be really exiting this until 2022. It is not 100% clear right now if the vaccine completely eliminates your ability to be infected. It is possible that people are getting infected and have such low levels of what we call titers, or kind of the amount of virus in your system, that you cannot spread it or you don't get sick. There's ongoing data because, we basically just started vaccinating people in December. So it's not that long that this has taken place. And that's why these questions about, does the vaccine completely prevent you from getting infected? Are you still able to transmit? Are questions we don't 100% have the answers to. There's ongoing research that is going to elucidate that in the coming months. Now, the hope is that we believe that you likely are not getting infected with the virus whatsoever. And if you are, you have such low levels of it that you do not spread it to other people. That is the general thought process right now. That is to be confirmed. Because we don't know, that is why when you get vaccinated, they still encourage you to wear a mask and socially distance. And you also have to remember that you might be the unlucky, 4 to 6% of people where the vaccine is not effective for you. I said it could be 95 to 90, 94 to 96% effective. My boss at work was in that percentage. She got fully vaccinated the same time as I did, completed his series in January, and actually had taken a COVID test just incidentally because he was getting a colonoscopy and found out that he had COVID. So he had no symptoms, nothing. Unfortunately, his family did not get sick. They had not been vaccinated yet, but he sent the email out as a precautionary tale to let you know that just because you're vaccinated still doesn't mean it's 100%, safe. And that is part of the reason that the government and your healthcare officials are encouraging you to still socially distance and wear masks. Now, that said, there are a lot of benefits once you've been vaccinated. First of all, it should give you peace of mind. It gives me peace of mind, right? To know that I'm going to work and I have a pretty decent layer of protection, but I still fully, PP up for all of my sick patients, and I wear a mask, a respirator really at work, and I wear, regular surgical masks whenever I'm in public. And that's because you don't know who you're coming in contact with. And we also don't know what variants are circulating. So, this is a race against time. The vaccines right now seem to be effective against the majority of the variants that we're seeing out of South Africa and Brazil, as well as the UK. Those are like the main concerns right now. But I'm sure you guys have heard about the situation in India, which is dire. And there are millions of people there. And as they get infected, this virus might continue to mutate, and it could spin off a mutation that has some penetration against our current vaccines. And that is why we globally are trying to get this under control as soon as possible to lessen the chance that a variant that is not protected or that the vaccine cannot protect against starts circulating here in the United States or other places, because that basically means we would have to start all over again with trying to get, a vaccine that would protect against that variant. So that is part of the reason that people tell you to continue to mask, because that risk of variant is still there. You're not 100% sure that you're protected. And it also just continues to kind of keep any kind of infections for those who are not vaccinated at bay, because everyone's doing the same thing. We don't want some rules for some people and not for others. That said, as you guys know, the CDC guidelines right now are that if you are in a group, a home where everyone is vaccinated, then you don't need to wear a mask. You can eat together, you can socialize in a smaller group, not a large group, but a smaller group. And, you can finally see those loved ones who maybe you haven't seen in a long time. And I mean, that's a big deal. Who knew that, we would just be rejoicing by the ability for you to hug a grandparent or an uncle that you have not seen in a long time. But those are some of the privileges that getting vaccinated will allow you, but they do come with some limitations. And I just want people to be smart. We are nearing a finish line, especially here in the United States, but we're still not there yet. And if we let our guard down and we don't maintain these protocols, then something could happen that will push out this entire pandemic even further.
Sure. Thank you so very much for that. We've got some online engagement. We've got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you before we move on. And the first question is, Dr. Claiborne, how long are they saying the vaccine is effective for?
Yeah, this is another question in addition to infectability and transmit, if you're able to transmit while vaccinated that they're not sure of. We believe that we have a minimum of 9 months to 12 months of protection. They're hoping that it could be longer, but I think realistically, we're looking at a future in which the COVID vaccine might be an annual vaccine that you have to get like the flu vaccine. And it is because it does mutate. And so, when you get a flu vaccine every year, what they're doing really is they're guessing which strands of the flu are going to be predominant that year. And that's why it's a different vaccine every year. And then they give that to you to protect you for the season. It's possible that we would have to have something similar to that for the coronavirus because of its ability to mutate, and also because your protection from a certain vaccine may kind of weakened after 9 months to a year. Those questions have yet to be answered. I know that people are eagerly awaiting that, but I would be mentally prepared to know that you may need to get a vaccine, annually. And I'm sure what they would do is roll it up into the flu vaccine. You guys would get vaccinated, once a year for the viruses that are most dangerous for that particular season.
Right. Thank you. I'm sure that gives clarity and helps, with some of the misnomers that have been spreaded.
Mhm.
Now I have two more questions right now. So if you don't have any reaction, does that mean the vaccine won't be effective?
No, it just means you might have a awesome immune system that you were able to ramp up without having any symptoms. Everyone's immune system is going to be a little bit different, and it might depend on your particular circumstance. Were you
Sure.
tired or dehydrated that day? Was your body kind of worn out? That's why I tell people when they're going in for their vaccine, try to be well rested, try to be hydrated, try to have sleep, because your body is going to be doing work. Now, if you're a younger, healthier person, you might not have any symptoms, and it doesn't mean that it's not working and that your body's not responding appropriately. It just means that it does it efficiently and you're not feeling it. And that's not necessarily even true. I mean, some young people are definitely getting side effects where they feel like bad headaches, fatigue, fever for a couple of days. And then my dad got his vaccine and literally had nothing. Like, he's like, maybe my arm was sore, and he's 70 years old. So it just is dependent on you as an individual. But when you get that vaccine, your immune system is going to do what it needs to do.
Sure. Thank you very much. For those of you who are just joining us here live with the Virginia Baptist State Convention, we have as our special guest, Dr. Elizabeth Claiborne, and we're discussing COVID, health, and the African American community. And we thank you so much for joining us. And Dr. Claiborne, she's doing an amazing job today sharing with us. We don't have her much longer, and so we're going to try to capitalize on these last few minutes that we have with her, because her schedule is so busy. But I just appreciate her taking the time to be with us today and to invest in the constituents of the Virginia Baptist State Convention. Our next question, social media is spreading the myth that the vaccine is not safe. How do we counter the negative post?
Yeah, so I think that it's important anytime you're telling people to gather information about a topic is to know your sources, right? Social media in general is not a valid source. Like, when I made a decision about getting vaccinated, I looked at the actual published data of the trials, which everyone actually has access to. And so you would want to make sure, are you looking at a medical journal, a peer-reviewed medical journal? Well, several physicians that are accredited have looked at this and are saying things. Are you looking at an organization that's gathering data from a reliable source? So when things are said on social media, you need to ask, like, where did that information come from? And if they cannot give you a source, an actual place that it came from, then you need to question whether or not that's true. I think the way that we combat like a lot of these misnomers is to come back to the data, the science, right? Like, this is 2021. You actually have access to the real data and the real science. And you want to make sure that you are telling them that, like, well, who said that? What organization said that? Was it, the American College of Emergency Physicians that I'm a part of? Probably not. So if it's not coming from a reliable source, then it may not be true. And so you need to do your due diligence. And if people are making decisions based on what they're seeing on Facebook, encourage them to look up where it came from, because they're going to start going down a rabbit hole and realizing that they're looking at information that could be false or misleading. And if they
Sure.
want, real information, then they need to go to a place where there are multiple organizations, professional organizations, and even government institutions. They're all saying the same thing, and have that publicly listed and publicly available for your review.
Awesome. Awesome. I like that. Know your source. And I could preach on that. I mean, that ought to be anything that, we ought to govern ourselves by that social media should not be our source of information. And especially when it comes to your health and your well-being, and especially the COVID vaccination. Another individual want to know if you've had COVID, should you still get the vaccine, and will there be a vaccine for kids under 16?
Great questions. So yes, you do want to be vaccinated even if you had COVID. And this is important because the data is now showing us that the natural immunity that you get from being infected with COVID actually is not as robust as what they are seeing in people who got vaccinated. So what I mean by that is when you get sick with COVID, your body does learn that virus, right? It got introduced to it, so it's going to learn some antibodies, but it's really only to that particular strand, first of all, that you were exposed to. And the reaction to your body might be kind of weak. And so you may not really have the protective proteins that we're looking for that block the virus that the mRNA or the J&J vaccine teach you how to make. And so there is superior protection when you're vaccinated versus just having natural immunity. And that is why they do encourage people who've been infected with COVID to still get vaccinated. My father, again, he actually got COVID over Christmas, was hospitalized, fortunately did well, discharged, and then he waited a period of 3 months and then got the vaccine. So if you have recently been infected, they may ask you to wait 2 to 3 months to make sure that your symptoms are completely resolved. And the reason they do that is because when you get vaccinated, it will challenge your immune system again, and they want to make sure that you're back to baseline and that you are recovered, because you do not want to hit an immune system that just was battling an illness with a vaccine. So that is why they'll tell people to wait, but they certainly will encourage them to still get the vaccine. As for kids, you guys probably recently saw in the news that the Pfizer, I believe, is going to be moving forward with potentially a study that will allow for authorization for kids 2 to 16, which are the group that they think the group that will be focused for kind of return to school. And I know that parents have a lot of questions when it comes to vaccinating their kids, but let me tell you, I'll be vaccinating Ada, my daughter, who's 2 years old, as soon as I can, because I am a constant risk of exposure to her. And anyone who's working with multiple people, they definitely are introducing this to their kids. And you want to be mindful that, again, this is a race against time. There could be another variant that pops up at any time that could take us back to square one. And kids right now are a group that, especially as they start going back to school, are going to start circulating, potentially passing this virus. And so it is an important group to be able to vaccinate. I'll bring up at the same time, because I think this is another important topic. And I know I'll get a lot of questions about this. I do believe that this vaccine is safe for pregnant and breastfeeding mothers. I am actually still breastfeeding Lita, my 11-month-old. And then part of the reason I do that is that they had some preliminary data that came out in March that showed that vaccinated people will be passing antibodies either through breast milk or through the placenta to their infant that's protective. So that means that if you're pregnant and you get the vaccine, your baby will be born with protection. And that's important because newborns will not be eligible for this vaccine anytime soon. They probably might lower it to 1-year-olds, but they are a very at-risk group. And so it would be great if you are pregnant to look at this, talk to your OBGYN and discuss it. I think it is the best option is for you to get vaccinated to protect yourself, because if you do get COVID while pregnant, you could have a very serious course that could cause you to become very sick or potentially lose your baby. And then you also want your baby to be born with some protection, because they will not be able to get a vaccine for some time. Additionally, then our pregnant and our breastfeeding moms like me, I'm going to try to keep breastfeeding Lita the little bit that she'll take as long as I can, because I'm passing those antibodies to her through the breast milk and offering her some protection until she gets to an age where she might be able to get a vaccine.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. And I want to kind of speak to that a little bit later on. But what do you say to those persons who've been vaccinated and feel that masks are either a hoax or they should not be forced to wear masks because they've been vaccinated? What would you say to those persons?
Yeah, so I would bring up again that, they're still rolling the dice, although it's, the odds are much more in their favor. They could be in that, 6 to 4% who just the vaccine does not protect them. And then they also have to be mindful that there are variants circulating at this time. So, it's not foolproof. I mean, that's why we're working so hard to get this under control. So not wearing a mask opens themselves up to risk. And it's also taking into consideration other people. It is not completely clear right now that being vaccinated does not allow you to transmit the virus to other people. We are hopeful that that is what's going on. But until that's 100% clear, you don't want to just be happily going about your business with no mask because you feel you're okay, and then hand it off to somebody who's, 80, 90 years old and cause them to die just because you thought that you were in the clear. So there are just too many unanswered questions. There's no reason to take the dice. And I mean, I know that masks are annoying, but let me tell you, getting COVID is much more annoying and much more dangerous. And so, or causing a family member to get sick. And there are going to be subsets of the population who cannot get vaccinated. People sometimes who are on chemotherapy or who are on immune suppressed medication, they may not be able to be vaccinated. And so they're relying on other people to protect them. And you never know who those people are in the community. And so I really feel strongly that when it comes to masks, it's a small nuisance for you to do something that's better for yourself, better for your family, and better for your community. So just do it.
Yeah, thank you. As we begin to look to wrapping up this session, I want to say thank you all for engaging us today. Thank each of you who asked questions, because again, this is important enough to us that we wanted to bring this to the constituents of the Virginia Baptist State Convention. I just wanted to share this one thing. We, in our community where I serve with the VDH, the committee that kind of, make sure that, the community is engaged in regarding COVID. And the question came up, how do we get vaccines to those individuals who are, homebound, to those individuals who can't get out or have transportation barriers, who are elderly? And someone came, I don't know who it was, but they came up with a brilliant idea. We have in our community Meals on Wheels. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was get the J&J vaccine to those persons who are on the Meals on Wheels route. And so although they can't get to the vaccination clinic and they have age on them, they're elderly, then we can get the vaccines to them. And I mean, just using what's at your disposal in your community to help, number one, educate, but then number two, get the vaccines into the hands of those populations who have great barriers. You had mentioned being able to still breastfeed, et cetera. Listen, you made our family proud and the African American community proud just to be on the front lines of all of this, and your engagement with the media outlets, the nationwide media outlets, reaching out to you and getting your input and your expertise. It's certainly a great moment in the history of the African American community. So if you can just speak to, as we close, how has this whole idea of you being a champion, and on the forefront of this, how have things unfolded, and how do you feel as an African American medical professional who has been on the front line of something that's so emerging so greatly, but not just the front lines, but on the national scene, informing and engaging and educating those in our country regarding this. Can you speak to that? Am I clear on what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an absolute honor, first of all, to be able to do the work that I do. I mean, I love being an emergency physician because I get to see like real impact on someone's life in a short period of time. And I tell people that sometimes I'm there for the best and worst that moments of their life. And people have to be extremely vulnerable with me. I think that it is an honor and privilege to do that kind of work. That said, I was always driven to be a voice for those who do not have a seat at the table right now on several issues that I think are important. And so
Sure.
this last year, when I reflect upon all the challenges I went through, right, the fear of having to work on the front lines while pregnant and what that would meant for my daughter and my family, just the fatigue, right, of being a physician in the emergency department during a pandemic in a community that's been very hard hit. It has been a challenging year, but when I look back, I'm just so proud of a lot of the growth that we've made. I mean, I feel that we
Sure.
have really substantiated our communities. I've seen people come together and care for one another. I've seen us take responsibility for other people. And I've also seen as a nation, because this took place simultaneously with the Black Lives Matter movement, with us just moving forward and saying, like, look, we are not going to ignore these issues with health disparities and health equity anymore. And so having someone that looks like me and understands the complexities of health and what happens in the African American community, I'm going to continue to be a champion for people who I think need to have a better seat at the table, have their voices heard, and get the resources and attention paid to them that have been long overdue. So I take, great pride in being able to do that. I also, I have a background in bioethics. And so one of the topics that's near and dear to my heart is end of life care. And so I would encourage everyone you can look this up online. You can Google my name, Elizabeth Claiborne, and TEDx. And I did a TEDx talk that specifically looked at end of life care in the era of COVID-19. And the reason I bring this up is because one of the things that really sticks with me every day when I go to work is that no one that I take care of that's really sick thought that they were going to die that day or get really sick. And you do not ever want to be in a situation where you come in and cannot talk for yourself and your family has no idea what's important to you, what your wishes are, what your medical history is. And then now I have to make decisions in, seconds that might determine what happens to you, how you're resuscitated, if you get a breathing tube. And, while these things might seem really clear when you're, younger, as you get older and you get more sick, these are challenging topics. And I think, particularly in the Black community, this ties back into our mistrust of the healthcare system. And we just don't do a good job, I think, talking about this and being upfront. We kind of put it to the side. We don't want to talk about it, out of sight, out of mind, but waiting until it's an emergency is not the right time. So I talk about in this talk why it's important for everyone to be upfront about what their goals of care are, what their advance directive is, so that someone like me, if a loved one does come in sick, I can have easy access to that information, know who to talk to, and the family has discussed it so that there's no questions, and that you're going to be honoring that individual, whatever they might want. And so that's, one of the pieces that I definitely want to leave you guys with, to kind of do your due diligence, look at that. I'm a big proponent of advance directives. I think particularly in the African American community, we have to do better when it comes to this, because, I lay out a couple of stories where I just see people, their last moments are just, painful, traumatic, in a way that they didn't need to be. And there's a lot better ways that we can honor people even when they do get seriously ill. And so I've really appreciated the national platform I've had to talk about important issues like that. And also just to be a representative. Like, I'm very well aware that there are a lot of brown and Black little girls and boys out there that see me on TV and are like, you know what, if she can do that, I can do that. And, that is like something that's most important to me. My daughter's face like lights up when she sees me on CNN. And it just makes me so proud. But I also know that being a representative is not just about my progress and my success. It's about everyone who looks like me, everyone who wants to dream big. And I just appreciate that I get so much love and support from my family and my community. So thank you for having me here to answer these kind of questions. And I'm going to continue to do my best to represent all of us well.
All right. Thank you so very much for sharing with us today, Dr. Claiborne. You have been listening to the emerging voice of Dr. Elizabeth Claiborne, who has shared with us today regarding COVID health and the African American community. And we're so appreciative for her coming today and sharing her expertise, her wisdom, her knowledge to help us to navigate through this pandemic. When I called Dr. Claiborne and asked her was she available to share with us, she said she would take the time to be with us today, and she did just that. And when I asked her regarding honorariums and what we could pay her, she said, please, please, please do not give me any honorarium. She said, if you wanted to give it to a scholarship or something like that, you may, but please do not give me an honorarium. And so, Dr. Claiborne, today what we're going to do on behalf of the Virginia Baptist State Convention, we're going to make a donation on your behalf to the Children's Home of Virginia Baptist in Petersburg, Virginia, in your honor. And so thank you so very much for your kind and gentle spirit and your willingness to come and share. There, CNN, when they're done with you, they'll say, we'll see you next time. But what we're going to do is something that CNN and Fox News that they cannot do for you or will not do for you. We're going to leave and close out with a word of prayer, and we'll pray for you and your team and your family and those that work with you and those that you work on, that God would bless and help and aid you in these turbulent times. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day and all of your many, many blessings. God, we thank you for our time together of sharing. And in our time of sharing, God, there is so much that we need that we cannot fix ourselves. We need your divine help, your divine guidance. God, your divine hand upon us. We thank you for Dr. Claiborne and God, all that you have created her to be, and to be an emerging voice, but also a leader and a champion in these times of COVID-19. I ask that you continue, Lord, to place your hand upon her, that you would, God, favor her and anoint her hands and her mind to do the work of a physician, but also carrying out the purpose that you created her for. I pray that you bless her family in a special way. Keep them all safe, oh God, and protect them. I pray, God, they're young parents, that you would guide them in the ways that you would have them to go, that they may raise their children up and they would rise and call her blessed. I pray, God, for the hospitals that she worked with, the schools, the patients, oh God, that she tend to, that you'd give her, again, wisdom and guidance, the guidance of God, that even when they're walking around scratching their heads, not understanding and not being able to see and determine what's going on, God, I ask that you'd give them clarity and wisdom and guidance, that others will know that they have been truly, truly blessed by God. We thank you for this time together. And I pray, God, that all who are on the line today in this virtual space, that you would bless them and help them, protect them as we all navigate through this uncharted territory. Bless us, cover us, and keep us. Bless the rest of our Virginia Baptist State Convention and all that we try to do for the work of the kingdom. In Jesus' holy name, hallelujah and amen. Amen. Thank you so very much. God bless each of you. Thank you for your engagement. And on Facebook, we've got a lot of thank yous to you, Dr. Claiborne. Thank you. We appreciate you so much. And again, so proud to be able to call you family.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
God bless. See you all at 7 o'clock p.m. with Dr. John Guns.